Hello guys, and welcome to another chapter in the production pipeline series with me, Eldrin from Logis Lumiere. Today we're going to be looking at Speedtree and Arnold procedurals and how to create a forest on our landscape. So Speedtree is a exciting plant modeler that's been used in quite a few feature films and games. Some of the most notable include Witcher 3, which just recently came out and has received quite a few accolades. Avengers Age of Ultron, which is still in theaters and is of course a really big Marvel film. Avatar, which used a lot of foliage, used Speedtree heavily, and Mad Max Fury Road, which is also currently in theaters and is receiving quite a bit of buzz as well. So Speedtree allows you to quickly create plants. A very diverse amount of plants. It allows you to draw the plants or create plants from templates, and it allows you to do it incredibly fast and get some really nice wind out. So if we go ahead and animate this scene manually here, we can see that these cards that we got out of Speedtree are animating in the wind. Vice versa, we can bring in our own meshes. I've brought in a custom leaf into Speedtree and used it to get these nice detailed leaves, and they too will blow in the wind even though they're custom geometry. So Speedtree allows you to incorporate it very easily into your pipeline, use custom stuff, export all that out with materials, and get very fast foliage going. Now what we can do in here is we can use the Arnold procedural and Arnold scene source exports to actually be able to populate this in Cinema 4D without taking a huge hit in our viewport as far as having lots of polygons. Speaking on polygons, and I understand that I'm not in Speedtree right now, but I kind of wanted to go over a few concepts before we go in there and really start to create our tree. If we go into polygon mode and we go ahead and select all of our polys here, we'll notice that this tree has 137,833 polygons altogether, which is pretty dense. It's close to 3 times the size of a typical DAZ model. DAZ model is somewhere around 12 to 20,000 polygons. So it's pretty heavy for something like Cinema 4D. If we start to clone this and we start to, really get a lot of these going. However, as you can see, Arnold handles this extremely fast and extremely easily. Now, what's unique about this tree versus our Lowpoly tree, which only has, if we go into its polygon mode, it only has 15,321 polygons, it's a little bit of an interesting thing about Arnold. Like Maxwell, because it's a ray tracer and because it traces the real world and achieves a realism through its global illumination algorithms, it traces opacity in a way that can be kind of slow compared to other render engines. So in something like standard render, because standard render uses alpha instead of a kind of sort of opacity in the way that Arnold uses it, you can get these rendered out pretty quickly. And in a game engine, same thing. They're using more of a rasterized kind of sort of on and off type of deal with opacity. And so something like this, typically, if you're used to a different rendering engine or you're used to a game engine, would render out incredibly fast. However, in Arnold, as you can see, we get not a slow feedback by any means, but we get a sort of blobby, progressive kind of sort of feel for this, and we also get a blobby result as well due to the way Arnold traces and the way that there's just a lot of polygons here. We can kind of reduce this. We have a Arnold parameters tag here with the opaque turned off, obviously. That's giving us our transparency. But if we were to turn off, say, the self shadows and the receive shadows, we might have a little bit better luck with our geometry overall. But if we go into Speedtree and we look at how this tree looks here, and we compare it to how it looks in Arnold, we're still not quite getting it. And we could finagle with this a lot, but you know, ultimately because of the opacity, and also, you know, these are flat-facing polygons as well, so they need to face the camera too, and because of the PLA animation on them, and also because of their general nature, it would be difficult to basically get those to always face the camera and to get that kind of sort of look. Now, I created a custom leaf that we can use in Speedtree to kind of sort of get a look where we can kind of see these leaves on all sides. See if I can find that leaf really fast. Okay. Looks like I might have deleted it. But yeah, if we create a new file here real quick, turn off the IPR, I can kind of show you how that would work. And I basically generated from Speedtree's leaves. So, you know, in a classic PlayStation, original PlayStation generation, you probably would have noticed something like this in say a Grand Theft Auto 3 or a Resident Evil, where you get close and you notice that there's like two planes on like a tree or a plant or something like that. And from far away, no matter where you look at that tree or that plane, or that tree or that bush or whatever plant is in that video game, because there's two maps on either side of these polygons, you pretty much, no matter where you look, as long as it's mapped correctly, you pretty much get an idea of like a full voluminous level of leaves. And so you could attach some geometry like that to each one of these cards. That would double your geometry a little bit. It would also double the calculations of the opacity in Arnold, and would slow down Arnold more. But in a traditional renderer, you would get a full bushy tree that way. But yeah, because of the whole opacity calculations and everything, this technique is kind of slow, even though the poly count is incredibly low, which is a testament to Arnold's capabilities. Arnold can render out a tree like this that has quite a few more polygons extremely easily. And in Speedtree, we can of course do a lot of things to go ahead and reduce this polygon count too, concentrating primarily on maybe the branches, reducing their polygon count. But this is what we're going to go for in this tutorial. Creating these leaves, you could do this manually and paint a texture in something like ZBrush or Mudbox or something like that. Manually create like a tree like this or a leaf like this very easily. I'm not going to really go into how to do that. If you guys want a tutorial on how I actually created this leaf, just drop a comment in the comments below, and I'll get that done. But basically, the whole idea is we want to avoid having to do any sort of opacity. So in this particular case, this tree here has no Arnold parameter tags. There's no need for any sort of opacity tweak for this, which means there's no opacity calculation in Arnold, which takes extra time. And so this tree is able to render out incredibly fast due to the fact that it's just using basic standard materials. There's no need for any sort of refraction. And in fact, if there's no refraction in your scene at all, then you can totally knock out all of those refraction rays from your scene. And you can even get a much faster speed boost because those rays don't even need to be calculated. So this is awesome. And Arnold will be able, you'll be able to clone hundreds of these, and Arnold won't even break a sweat. Alright, so here in Speedtree, we're going to go ahead and start a new tree. And here in Speedtree, when you begin, you'll see you get kind of like a help window here. You got a getting started, which will be really nice. Here on the YouTube, you've got a tutorial if you just go and just type in your search bar up there and type in Speedtree introduction or something like that, there's a free, really detailed tutorial that goes over a lot of the applications of this program. I'm going to go over most of this stuff really quickly in this tutorial, but the guy, he goes over everything in a really clean way, and the program is pretty simple. It likens itself to really easy learning. There's not really a steep learning curve here. But what we can do is we can go ahead and actually go into our node tree here, and we've got our tree, and we can go ahead and click the add button, and we could add a trunk from the library here. These are basically pre-built objects here. We can build something like a tall pine, and it's giving us our units here, which are attributary here in Speedtree. I consider them feet, but they're really just units. You could do that, or you could come in and you could pick another one of these different types, something like a palm, perhaps. Just 28 feet high, give or take. Or you can hold space and you can actually start to draw on the grid, and you can basically draw out your own trunk however you like. And so you can get very custom in here, and this is kind of how I built my tree. And then what you can do is you can select the trunk, and you can actually come over here to the edit and click on the generators, and it's going to become nodes. And when you do that and you click on the branch, the trunk again, you're going to get a nice little spine graph here, and you're going to be able to actually manipulate your trunk manually here. And the tangents here are automatically broken here in Speedtree, so you're not going to really get what you would normally be accustomed to in Maya or Cinema 4D, where the branches are just together and the whole entire curve moves together. So just bear that in mind. But you can move this, you can move these around, increase the length of your branch a little bit, bring that tangent out, bring that down, so forth and so on. I'm left clicking in this empty space here in order to orbit, middle clicking and holding to pan, and zoom is the middle click scroll, or the middle wheel scroll. That'll zoom in for you. Right click is going to give you some options for doing different things, and you can click on nodes again to get back into generation mode. So we're going to go ahead and undo a few of those steps because I liked what I drew at first. I like this shortness here. And so there you go. That's how you can draw. Now you can draw onto the trunk as well. And now you'll notice that you get a second level here called branches. And so now we're drawing a second level of branches here onto our tree. We can move around in 3 dimensions here and go ahead and start to draw some off in this direction, and maybe this direction, and we can start to build this tree up a little bit. And in the interest of realism, I like to draw some branches off of the cap as well, to keep it from having like this little nub. I keep occasionally going in and either holding space to try to pan or using Alt. It's kind of hard sometimes to wrap your head around a slightly different control scheme, but you get used to it after a while. So yeah, we can create some branches like that. Maybe create one more here, and pull that off. Alright, here under render, we can come in and we can change our mode to wireframe if we want, and we can see how much detail we have. And so if we deselect everything, we can see what our total poly count is, and right now we're at 8,400, give or take, 8,439 to be more exact. And so we can come in here into the trunk, and what we can do is under the segments here, or maybe under the level of detail, we can actually come in here to the segment multiplier, and what we can start to do is we can start to dial down the level of segments here in our trunk. And as we do that, we can significantly reduce the polygon count overall of our mesh. We can come into the branches level and do the same exact thing. And this is going to allow us, this is an optimization I didn't do on my tree that I showed you earlier in the tutorial, but this is an optimization you could use to tighten up your geometry and get a much lower count, which will make things easier on Arnold a little bit, allow you to get even more trees in there, and offset the fact that we're going to have to generate a heck of a lot of actual leaf geometry to go ahead and actually bushel this canopy out, so to speak. Alright, so with that set, in order to get our leaves to kind of sort of, create a nice bush on this tree, what we could do is you can come in here into your branches and you can go ahead and add, once again, preset geometry to these things. So if we go ahead and add, say, branches again, and go ahead and add maybe some standard low poly branches, all of a sudden now we've got a huge amount of geometry here available for us to actually add leaves onto, which is really great. So basically what it did was it came in and added some level 1 geometry and level 2 branch geometry to it for us. So I believe if you're familiar with L systems, I believe L systems work in a similar way to this, where each level, you're adding more and more branches to it. And so now we've got this really dense geometry. Let's go ahead and save this because this program is really heavy as far as the video card is concerned. And just in case I do some really rapid movements and it ends up crashing on me, I just want to make sure we have a copy. And so actually that copy, if we go ahead and hit save as again, was saved right here in a Speedtree folder. So I just created another folder for this new program, and basically I'm saving my meshes in there. Alright, and so this is going to be our detailed tree. And so now what we can do is, I don't really like necessarily that level 2. Since I'm going to add twigs to this level, just to keep the geometry low, I'm going to go ahead and just leave us with just one level here. And I'm going to go ahead and add a preset twigs to this level. And that's going to put us at 73 here. Alright, so now if we want to tweak where these twigs are actually growing on our branches, what we can do is we can come in here into our generation tab, and right now it's using a relative style for tweaking the branches, and so we can increase the number of branches that get generated or decrease that number to reduce the level of complexity of our scene here. And as we reduce that number, we're going to get less and less branches here. So the number kind of sort of acts as like how many twigs off of each segment of the branches pretty much is going to get generated. And so let's go ahead and actually add a leaf level to this. So leaves, and we're going to add sky sensitive individual leaves here. And that's going to give us a bunch of card leaves. So if we zoom in, we can see that these are just basically planes. And they're going to be facing up towards the sky in a similar fashion to a real world type tree. And so yeah, we're getting some nice density here. I like where this is going, and we're actually at about 60,000. So this is actually a little bit better than my previous tree. Alright, but instead of using these cards, let's go ahead and actually load in our own mesh. So we can come in and let's just go back to Cinema 4D here real quick, and I can show you kind of sort of how this leaf geometry works a little bit. So let's just take a small detour here. Alright, so here in Cinema we have this leaf, and it's already been textured. And let's go into the network editor and see what we're working with as far as the textures are concerned here. So we've got a basic leaf diffuse, specular, and a bump map that is giving us some of that nice veinous detail on the leaf. Now, under our standard shader, we've plugged the diffuse, of course, into the color, but we've set the backlighting to 1. Now, what does backlighting do? Well, if we were to bring in a sphere into this scene, and we were to place it underneath the leaf a little bit and scale it way down, and then if we were to add a Arnold light and go ahead and backlight the leaf, hence the backlighting, what we'll see is that we can actually see a outline of the sphere behind the leaf. So the backlighting just creates this nice translucent subsurface scattering type veinous effect in the leaf. This is going to give us a very realistic look when we have, you know, maybe a dawn light coming off of the horizon, hitting a hero tree, and we want to see objects walking behind the trees and different things like that. So that's predominantly the basis for this leaf material that we're going to use in our scene. The specular is set pretty high with a relatively low roughness. Leaves are almost a plasticky, textury, waxy kind of sort of a feel on the top of them if you ever just went out and touched a leaf. And they pretty much kind of sort of reflect light back at you. I set the reflectance at normal up a little bit so that some of that Fresnel bleeds in to the leaf. If you set this all the way up to 1, you're basically pretty much saying that there is going to be like no Fresnel at all, really. You're bleeding the whole entire Fresnel back, or the whole entire specular right back into the leaf, and you get like this really, really, really shiny leaf here. As you dial that down, of course, to 0, you're pretty much allowing the Fresnel to act the way it normally would act. Thus the edges get, you know, that shininess, and then when the camera's facing something, you get most of the base color. Alright, and of course, since we're not using any refraction, this leaf renders incredibly fast. Alright, so that's our leaf. So coming in here, what we can do is we can actually go into our meshes tab here, and we can go ahead and add our, actually, one other thing about this leaf really quickly. You see where its axis is. So its axis is actually at the tip of the leaf, which is important because here in Speedtree, it's going to place the mesh axis directly onto the branch. So as long as you have that axis right, your leaves should hang off of the branches appropriately. If your axis is in the middle of the leaf, then the leaves are going to be kind of sort of penetrating the branch, and that's not going to look very realistic. Alright, so what we can do is we can click this add button here in our meshes tab, and we can come to our low level geometry here, come to our OBJ. We can export the OBJ out using Riptide, using something like ZBrush as the preset, and it'll come out just fine. Open that up, and we can go ahead and use this as either a leaf or a frond mesh, and that'll take care of any issues that we're going to have there. Here we're going to go ahead and set this to Y up right-handed because that's the coordinate system that Cinema 4D uses. It's also the coordinate system that Maya uses, so that's probably what you're going to want to set this up as if you're going ahead and modeling a custom mesh in either one of those programs. Alright, and here we can click on one of our leaves to get our whole entire leaf level selected, or we can come in here to our node graph and select our leaves, and we can come down to meshes, and we can go ahead and say that we want or we come here to leaves actually, sorry. And we can come to our geometry and say that we want to use the detailed leaf as our geometry instead of using cards or a simple leaf. And so there you go. Now, if you want to add a material to this leaf, just for visualization purposes here in Speedtree, you can come over to your materials and you can go ahead and click the plus button here. And by default, Speedtree is going to put you into its directory, and you can come in, you come to samples here, you come into textures, you go ahead and find a nice texture here for your leaves, or you could find a nice texture for your bark. Let's go ahead and bring in some bark here real quick. We're going to use the broadleaf bark this time, and that's going to come in that way. And then I'm going to go ahead and add another material. And this time, I'm going to go into my H drive, and I'm going to go ahead and hunt down my leaf diffuse. And that's just going to allow me to see my leaves in all their glory. So, come over here to Testa 2, and we'll come to our leaf detailed, come into C4D, come to our textures directory, and we're going to go ahead and grab our diffuse. And that's going to give us our leaf. Alright, so for the leaves, come over here into the Leaves tab. We've already selected a geometry that we wanted to use. Let's go ahead and select the material for that. It's going to be Leaf Detailed Diffuse. That's going to color our leaves. Selecting our trunk, in Speedtree, the materials will get inherited up the levels. So if we just texture our trunk, all of our branches will automatically get materialized. So that's really great. Let's go ahead and add a new material to the branches, and let's go ahead and select broadleaf bark, and there we go. We have textured our whole entire tree. Excellent. Now our leaves might maybe be a little bit small, so we come in here to our leaf level again, come to generation, and we could change the size scaler here. Or we can come into the leaves and change their size here. I prefer to change the size of the leaves here under the leaves. Simply, it just seems to make more sense to me to do it here than to do it on the generation level. But you could do it on either. It just depends on, you know, how you want your workflow to work out. And so we'll do that. And then if we want to add more leaves to this to make this a little bit more dense, what we could do is come in to our shared area under our generation, and we could go ahead and actually manipulate the first and last properties here, and that's just going to control where on the branch the leaves actually grow. So if the last is set to the first, basically all the leaves are going to grow in a clump right here on the first kind of sort of vertex or segment of the branch. And as we move that out, they're going to kind of sort of grow over the whole level of the actual twig itself. Once again, we can increase their size scaler here. That's going to increase their size. The sync is going to be useful if you didn't take any of my advice and actually you have a leaf that's slightly offset for some particular reason from the branch, and so they're not actually hanging right on the branch. You could use the sync to kind of sort of move the leaves in and out and move them away from their branch or move them deeper into the branch. You know, in our particular case, we are good, so we don't really need to mess with that. We can mess with the steps, of course, to add even more leaves per step for the twigs. And that's going to increase the amount of leaves that we actually have. We can also go into something like absolute mode. And, you know, now we're going to get an absolute level of leaves here. And so with that, we can kind of sort of decrease our number, and we can start to get less leaves. Come in here to our mode and maybe use something like proportional or proportional steps. And I find that this mode is a little bit easier to understand, a little bit. You know, as we increase the steps, we get more, and then per step, we can start to increase the number and, you know, grow out our leaves that way. And then we can mess with things like the jumble to kind of sort of tweak their rotation and different things. You know, so there's a lot of good ways in here to kind of sort of build up your leaves. Kind of sort of liking the proportional kind of sort of look here a little bit. And that's what I kind of used on my original tree. Classic is working really well too with the default settings, of course. The frequency of the leaves is going to control how frequent all of this other stuff happens. And yeah, now we're starting to get like 1,000,000 leaves here, so tone that back down to about a frequency of 1. And our geometry is not light for this leaf. It's relatively light. I think it's like about 10, 12 polygons, but you know, you multiply that by like this many leaves, and of course you're starting to get a little bit crazy here. Actually, I think I'm going to go with proportional steps, and I'm going to bring down my step size to about 3. And bring down the number to about 2, and maybe keep it at 3. Maybe we'll go with classic. We're at about 2,000 with that. Let's go ahead and decrease. It's tricky because, you know, we want this to be pretty bushy, but at the same time, we don't want to deal with that incredible amount of geometry. This is something where I might go into Cinema and actually tweak the leaf a little bit to get less geometry out of it, so we have less of a multiplier. But all in all, that's pretty much kind of how you're going to go with that. And that's how you can generate your tree. So what we can do now is we can go ahead and do a export mesh. And Speedtree will happily export out your mesh to Cinema 4D if you tell it to, which is really great. And we can go into our detailed tree. And so I'm saving these trees out as separate objects on the root directory of Testa. And then we can import all that stuff into the Arnold landscape as master assets a little bit later. So we'll save this tree out, and we'll hit yes to replace it. And what we can come in here and do is, first of all, set this units to centimeters, since that's going to be Cinema 4D's default units. We're going to have to scale the tree up because there's no real way to... You could set this to feet, but in Cinema 4D it's really not going to actually be feet per se. In comparison to everything else in Cinema 4D, I've noticed that the tree is going to be super duper small no matter what you set these units to. So you're going to have to mess with the scale to increase the size of that to a more real world look. Here we can include the wind and the bones, and that's going to include PLA animation for all of the leaves, as well as a bone system for the trees. And that's how you get this result that you see here, where you have the leaves basically animating. And if we turn off Arnold here and just kind of sort of script this back and forth, you can see that the branches are moving, and that's due to the bone animation, and you can see that the leaves are moving, and that's due to the PLA. All right. And then you can control how long you want that animation to be, the frame rate, how strong you want the wind to be, and whether or not you want gusting to happen. We'll include the detail layers in the normal maps. That way we can get highly detailed textures out of here for the tree bark. The leaves we've already created, so we're just going to import our textures in from our master asset for our leaf. And then I like to group these by generator name, because what will happen is each one of these separate levels will pretty much get their own object in Cinema 4D. So you'll get something similar to this, where each individual generator level has gotten its own separate kind of sort of object, and that just gives you a little bit more options for control as far as, you know, taking the leaves and doing something slightly different with them than you would do with the twigs or the branches or the trunk. It's just a nice organization thing. And all this stuff is pretty self-explanatory. You export out the caps. It's going to be that cap right here at the end of the tree. The branches are going to be all the twigs and branch type stuff. The facing leaves would be any sort of cards that you might have in your scene. We don't have any, so we can get rid of that. Non-facing leaves are going to be all these this mesh geometry, or the simple cards that you would get if you were to use just a simple card geometry out of this program. And not sure about the zones and forces. We can include the normal maps and the detail layers. Yeah, I already talked about that. It's going to allow us to get this really detailed, nice trunk geometry. And we can click OK and export that out. I'm not going to use this tree. I already have a tree. But that's the general idea. So we'll hit save on this. And back here in Cinema 4D, what we'll do in the next lesson is we'll go over how to actually we'll go over some final texturing things with this, and then I'll show you how to use the Arnold procedural and the Arnold scene export to basically take this into the landscape scene and turn this into a forest. So see you guys there.